Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. I was perusing the publication we're currently reviewing on Nichiren, the Buddhist Prophet, from our friends at Forgotten Books, a great source of older documents. If you're looking for older books on many subjects that are out of print, Forgotten Books may have what you're looking for. So this is a reproduction of a Harvard publication from 1916, and this author being, well, his name Masaharu Anasaki, was obviously Japanese, but a professor and a doctorate studies, working on his own independently, but also with Harvard University, teaching there, and Harvard being the bastion of Western, what we call, although it's a misnomer, Judeo-Christian, really a misnomer. Let's just call it what it is, Christian culture. Has inculcated a lot of that in his translation, his writings on Nichiren and Nichiren's life. But we still get the gist of Nichiren's life, right? Albeit with certain words that just don't belong in Buddhism. But we can see past that, hopefully, yeah. A subject I've talked about many times. My own revelations of my own cultural upbringings getting in the way of my full understanding of Buddhism and Namo Myoho Renge Kyo and the practice of Shakyamuni's teachings. Once I identified that in myself, Buddhism became huge, immense. So this is why I'm always bringing it up, because I understand that I'm not alone. I'm a Westerner. And we're brought into a culture that constantly reminds us of the rhetoric, which is mystifying and magical. And there's nothing mystifying and magical about Shakyamuni's teachings. They're all about living this life fully, completely, unimpeded, full potential. We hear those words, and we go, yeah. But in the back of our minds, Westerners, we think, to the degree that the gods will allow it, right? We may not say that literally, but that's the voice in the back of your head, as much as I can, right? That's such bullcrap. Buddhism isn't about that limitation. It's all about getting rid of it. So, all right, my piece said. So right now, this author is taking us through a lot of just a synopsis sort of overview of the Lotus Sutra, because he's setting it up for us to understand Nichiren's development over his lifetime and the aha moments that he had in his lifetime, which I think is really insightful and helpful for you and I to get a context around why Nichiren wrote the way he did, what he railed against in his time, right? It's helpful to understand, and actually helps us be more sympathetic or to identify with Nichiren's life and practice, yeah? In regards to that, in the back of the book, I was perusing the book again. I haven't seen it in a long time. Mr. Anasaki gave us a chronological table of Buddhism in Japan, and it starts when Buddhism is, certainly according to this study, introduced to Japan, takes us up to Nichiren, and then has a comprehensive kind of overview, not comprehensive, doesn't have every little minute thing that happened in Nichiren, but it has a good overview. In fact, I'll show you here. I posted this on the website. It has Nichiren's lifetime line chronology from birth to death and some of the major events. But it's helpful to review just to get a sense for how things developed in Nichiren's doctrine and his teachings and his remonstrations and so on and so forth. So this obviously is zoomed in. It's a big document, and I'm still going to add to it, I think. I just went up to Nichiren's death. There's more in the chronology in the book afterward, up to the 16th century, I believe. But this is a rather large document. I posted it on threefoldlotus.com with the obvious name, Nichiren's lifetime, whatever. I think that's what it says on the button, Nichiren's lifetime. Anyway, you can easily zoom into this document and get to the final years and so on and so forth. And you can do that in your browser very easily. Oops. Still getting used to this software, strange as it is. Okay, back to normal, I hope. All right, so let's continue. He's talking about the moment when in the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni, the treasure tower appears. He doesn't call it the treasure tower in here, but that's what it is, the heavenly shrine. You see that Christian rhetoric getting in here? It's the treasure tower, this we know. And it is Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, right? The 7-jeweled tower. And there's a voice that emanates from the tower, and the tower opens, and therein is seated Taho Buddha, right? Known by other names. Here he's called Buddha Prabhuta Ratna, or accumulated treasures. In Japanese, he's referred to as Taho Buddha. He's on that mandala near the top, seated next to Shakyamuni, who long since passed away from his earthly manifestation. Earthly manifestation? Buddhas don't earthly manifest. See, this is part of that misunderstanding in Buddhism that people want, and it was rampant in Shakyamuni's day, that identified Shakyamuni as the Buddha. Shakyamuni was enlightened. He was awakened to Buddha or Buddha-ness, a verb, a moment-to-moment consciousness. But Buddha isn't a person. It's an experience of the sentient mind. And that's the only place it exists. So to say he's passed away from his earthly manifestation, it's very misleading, isn't it? You could be an apologist for this kind of rhetoric and say, well, that just means that enlightenment, that stage of enlightenment was reached by some people or some person, and now that person is gone, so that manifestation of this Buddha is gone. Okay, I can work with it. But always understand, Buddha-ness is a state of knowing, a perceptive state, an experience of. And since the experience of is always available, as soon as there's an of, in other words, the universe, as soon as there's plasma, even before atoms, there is stuff, and stuff can be perceived. That's not to say it is perceived, and that's where people go off in another route with magical thinking. And well, then there was always Buddha, and Buddha was, or God was, or consciousness was, and maybe the whole universe is a brain, or is a mind, or is a consciousness. Relax. Buddhism has always been about this life, right now, your life, my life. It's not about the magic and the mystery. It's about living this life fully. And so Buddha or Buddha-ness is an experience that understands, includes the amazing process that instantiates this life. All of it. And the fact that we can be conscious witnesses of it. That's the most amazing thing. And that's what Nichiren constantly reminds us of, this opportunity to be human with a sentient mind is so incredibly, unfathomably precious just because of its rarity. How could you possibly take it for granted? Right? Nichiren has pointed that out several times. So here we go. So here we're in the Lotus Sutra again, and has now appeared to adore, respect, give dignity to, validate Shakyamuni, who is still working in the world. A bodhisattva, right? The dramatic situation reaches its climax when the old Buddha invites the present one, and the two sit side by side in the treasure tower, in the shrine. The joint proclamation made by them is to prepare the disciples for the approaching end of Shakyamuni's earthly ministry. You see this recurrent theme in Buddhism? I won't be here forever. You can't rely on me as Buddha. I'm your teacher. I'm your enabler, so you can teach yourself Buddha-ness, to be Buddha-fied, right? And the two sit side by side, to prepare the disciple, blah, 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 and to encourage and stimulate them to the work to be done after the master's passing away. Now, there's a tacit example that the translations often miss, but he pointed out the very error I've been trying to define. And to encourage and stimulate them to the work to be done after the master's passing away. Who's the master? Shakyamuni. Not Buddha. Buddha doesn't pass away. Shakyamuni does. Quote, revere the truth revealed in this sacred book, and preach it to others. Well, there's the whole of the practice, right? Revere the Lotus Sutra, the teachings in the Lotus Sutra, the way, the methodology of self-enlightenment, and teach others about it. The Bodhisattva way. That's the whole practice right there in one sentence. Anyone who will fulfill this task, so difficult to do, is entitled to attain the way of the Buddha beyond comparison. The way of Buddha. There it is again. Buddha is not a thing, it's an experience. The way of Buddha. Anyone who does this, takes on the Bodhisattva task, he is the child of Buddha. The eyes of the world, and will be praised by all Buddhas. Right? This is from chapter 11 in the Lotus Sutra. The admonition is further encouraged by the prophetic Vyakarana given to Devadatta, the wicked cousin of Shakyamuni, who, because of his long connection with Shakyamuni, will, in spite of his wickedness, attain Buddhahood at a certain future time. He'll get there. He's very jealous of Shakyamuni's attention. Everybody calls you Buddha, right? But ultimately, Devadatta will get past his jealousy, and he'll get the lessons, and he'll attain Buddhahood. Just like all of us. We all have different paths. Sometimes it's ugly. But as long as we remain, what would Nichiren say? Steadfast, resolved, single-minded. We can't avoid our Buddha-ness so long as we're making the effort. Moreover, the assurance of the final perfection is vividly impressed by the instantaneous transformation of a naga, a serpent tribe girl who now appears as a preacher of the perfect truth and one of the Tathagata's messengers. Remember the transformation of the dragon daughter? The dragon king's daughter? The final conversion of the typical wicked man and of the innocent girl indicate that Buddhahood is to be realized by all. And these episodes were always a source of inspiring resolve and encouraged trust in the efficacy of the excellent truth revealed in this Lotus Sutra. After the apocalyptic scene and the miraculous conversions, other practical admonitions are given to the future Buddhas. Two ways of spreading the truth are indicated. One, the way of the vigorous polemic, shakubuku, the repressive and aggressive method of propaganda, and the other way of pacific self-training, the gentle, persuasive method, shoju. Chapters 13 and 14, entitled respectively the exertion or the perseverance and the peaceful methods or peaceful training. The peaceful training in meditation and watchfulness over self was a source of great inspiration to many Buddhists, but greater, at least so far as Nichiren is concerned, was the power inspired by the admonition to perseverance. Indeed, the characteristic feature in Nichiren's ideal consisted in translating into life the exhortations to strenuous effort in what he called the, quote, reading of the scripture or text by the bodily life, end quote, which meant actual life, fully in accordance with the truths taught in the book, especially with the exhortations, encouragement, and assurances contained in this chapter on perseverance. As we shall see later, in every hardship and peril which Nichiren encountered, he derived consolation from Buddha's reassurances and stimulating inspiration from the vows uttered by his disciples to sacrifice everything for the sake of the truth, and to endure perils sustained by firm belief in the mission of the Tathagata's messengers. True enough, we read that constantly in the writings of Nichiren, the Gosho, yeah? With these exhortations given to future Buddhas closes the first grand division of the book, which is the revelation of the Soul Road, proclaimed by Shakyamuni in the manifestation aspect of his personality. With the 15th chapter opens the revelation of his true eternal primeval personality. Together with the apparition of his primeval disciples, the vows they take and the mission entrusted to them. This is the latter half of the Lotus Sutra where he explains the lifespan of the Tathagata, that he, Shakyamuni, isn't Buddha, that Buddha is a condition that he has attained that is available to anyone who cares to put effort to it, and then he transmits these teachings to the bodhisattvas of the earth, right? Modern mankind. This thought on the two aspects of Buddha's personality is a consummate outcome of religious or practice and philosophical speculation on the transient and the everlasting aspect of Buddha's person and work, a matter touched upon before when we characterized the book, Lotus, as the Johannine literature of Buddhism. Not sure what that means. Some of you may. And now in the last half is revealed the primeval Buddhahood, or the entity and functions of the Buddhist Logos, a Greek term, right? So long as the Buddhists regard their master as a man who achieved Buddhahood at a certain time, they fail to recognize the true person of Buddha, who in reality from eternity has been Buddha, the Lord of the world. Again, the way this is worded still leans toward deification, a Christian sickness, yeah? Again, I repeat, Buddha is not a noun. Buddha is an active experience of truth. So don't get confused by the poor rhetoric here. So long as the vision of Buddhists is thus limited, they are unaware of their own true being, which is as eternal as Buddha's own primeval nature and attainment. He's struggling with it. He gets it, but he's struggling with it. The truth is eternal, or more to the point, as is discussed in the sutras and by Nichiren, time without beginning. There's energy, and then there's the formation to form the nidana, right? Once energy starts to become, this is where time is manufactured. And we live moment to moment. Our illusion of space and stuff is a function of our momentum of moment-to-moment time creation. As soon as there's time, there is the consciousness of, or the formation of form. And so if you witness in each moment of your life, let's take this down a notch. Simply put, if you live your life with the consciousness, the little mental voice that's constantly reminding you of the grandeur of this moment and what energies are involved in the very manufacturing of this moment with everything in it, that grandeur, far beyond comprehension, is so amazing, right? Moment to moment, that the little petty, in comparison, issues of ownership, control, having, not losing, all becomes so infinitesimally, it's not even annoying. It's a fly buzzing 100 miles away. Does it bother you? No, you're not even, you know it's there. But is it affecting you, influencing you? No. That's the point here. That if you could live every moment of your life understanding what's at play here, what this whole grand process really is, and your situation in it, your awareness of it, how can these other things that you've accrued that are so important to you maintain their importance? They're just not that important. They are, in fact, converted into fascination. Sparklers. Wow. Look at this. Wow, somebody stole my car. It's so amazing. Oh, man. I guess I'm not getting to work today. Well, I guess I'll set about to managing this, see what comes of this. This should be interesting. Will I get my car back? Well, poor thief. What are they doing? How are they so controlled by their desire to possess someone else's thing? The avarice, the greed, the anger, it's so sad. Maybe I'll meet them. Maybe I'll introduce them to Namu Myoho Geikyo. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, that's why my car was stolen. So I get off my ass and introduce more people to Buddha-ness. So this doesn't happen so much because it's very it's kind of annoying, right? Instead of, oh my goodness, I've lost my car. What am I going to do? See, that kind of reaction is all attachment, all ego. But we're not trained In fact, we are trained. We are trained to be that drama queen of world. Everything is such an imposition on my life. But I've said many times, life doesn't happen to you. It happens for you. What do I mean when I say that? Exactly this. I don't want to reduce it to entertainment. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Is every moment is an opportunity to experience more. And what is Buddhism about? Experiencing all. So don't be frightened by what happens in your life. It may appear on the surface to be yucky. And I'm not saying everything happens for a reason. Please don't glue yourselves to that rhetoric. It's not that everything happens for a reason, because that implies some kind of a controller, like, again, happening to us. No, life happens because life happens. You get to be a witness, an observer, and you get to interact with it. How amazing. That's Buddhism, yeah? The truth is eternal. Well, it's eternal in the sense that as long as there's time, it's happening. That's truth. If you want to understand eternity that way, but many of us are trained to understand that eternity is just this infinite. Infinity is the playground of mathematicians and physicists. It's not, in fact, it breaks everything that they do in math. It just goes that way. It's a non-answerable, we can't think beyond. And, in Buddhism, we don't do that. There is no infinity in Buddhism. There is time without beginning, and there's time without the end. Because time is the issue. Time is our experience. Time is the thing that we're moving through. It doesn't extend forever. It just extends till it stops or starts over, whatever, right? Like the CCC. This is the fundamental conception, which is further elucidated by showing visions reaching to the great past, time without beginning, as well as into the time without end future. But it's all within the context of this time capsule, this universe. Having been quickened by Buddha's urging, the bodhisattvas in the congregation ask Buddha to entrust to them the task of propagating and perpetuating the truth. Because that's the mission we're given, right? And this is where, okay, I'll just let him say it. Quite contrary to their expectation, however, and ours, they are counseled to keep themselves quiet. While they are astonished by the Lord's dissuasion, he summons the innumerable hosts of bodhisattvas who appear out of the earth from all quarters. Among them, 4 figures are conspicuous who were never known before to any of the humanity in the assembly, right? And whose names they are told are Visita Karitra, Anatta Karitra, etc., the 4 leaders of the bodhisattvas of the earth. The endless hosts, following the 4 leaders, pay adoration to the Buddha and pledge themselves to work for the perpetuation of the truth and salvation of all being, or emancipation of all beings. The surprise of the other members of the assembly is voiced by Maitreya, the highest of the bodhisattvas, who asked the Buddha, "Who are these bodhisattvas who've appeared out of the earth?" And the answer is that they have existed from all eternity. In other words, the potential for them to arise in the future has been built into the very momentum of this thing we call time or universe. You had to expect them to manifest. They're part of potential, right? With this instantiation of this great engine of life, the universe, humanity had to appear somewhere, and within the operations of the manifestations of mankind, there had to be an evolution of the mind, just like he's been teaching for years, to increase the capacity to, at some point in the future, have the capacity to simply instantiate Buddha-ness. And they will be those teachers who must propagate this teaching so that all humans, sentient minds, and non-sentient minds can realize enlightenment, Buddha-ness. Who do you think he's talking about? Right? Nichiren understands this. Nichiren says, oh, crap, that's why I am the way I am. Because it's falling on me. Not because I was chosen. Not because I'm especially holy. I just happen to be in the fifth 500-year period after his demise, his extinction. He predicted this would happen, and I'm living proof. I am that instantiation of Bodhisattva Jogyo. I mean, I'm not an incarnation of, but the situation that Buddha describes in the Lotus Sutra of this future enlightenment and the mission that some man or woman would feel inspired to staunchly be the defender of and propagator of this teaching as it's being taught, rather than all the malarkey that's going on around the world, let alone Japan. Somebody's going to pick this up and say, no, don't let this disappear. See the purity, see how this works. Well, that's me, Nichiren thinks. That's what I'm doing. Holy crap, he was right. Somebody would have to come out of the woodwork to proclaim this truth and keep it from being lost. That just happens to be what I'm doing. See, Nichiren's reverence from this is not to think of himself as an incarnation of Buddha, but to realize in his own nature that his very behavior was foreseen by this great master of Buddhism. Wow. How important is that mission? Not me, Nichiren, the mission that is integrated, inculcated into my life being itself. I am enacting exactly what I'm supposed to do, what's supposed to happen. Nichiren gets a lot of, and it's in his exile in Sado that he finally comes to that realization. And so he writes a lot of major writings while he's in Sado and afterward with regard to this realization, not because he's proclaiming, look at me, Nichiren. What he's saying is, look at us. Look at this mission that I'm the leader of, but not the incarnation of. The meaning is much greater than me, Nichiren, the fisherman's son. It's this propagation that's amazing. Because this is the time. This is the time for all of us to get down to brass tacks and make this single-mindedly seeking Buddha. This is the greatest message of Nichiren. It's not egotistical at all. If anything, it's an exegesis that he feels deep, profound responsibility for. And he's sharing it with us to do the same thing. Do as he's done. Realize that you and I are the bodhisattvas of the earth. it's our time to do this, lest the teachings of enlightenment disappear and mankind just slowly ebbs back into caves and complete ignorance, right? The 16th chapter, entitled The Duration of the Tathagata's Life, is meant to solve the puzzle and to reveal the eternal existence of Buddha's personality. Boy, that's a word salad trying to say something he doesn't understand. It's not Buddha's personality we're all trying to emulate. Personality, that's so Western, right? If you all wear a tie and a particular hat, we can be Buddha. This attachment to a physical thing, yeah? The Buddha who was born and is going to die, or to disappear from among mankind, is but a manifestation, and his apparent death is in order to dispel the disciples' vain hope of having his earthly manifestation with them forever. It's not his earthly manifestation. It's Buddha-ness captured by one man. Buddha-ness is not one man, nor is it only captured by one man. It is constantly available. It is part and parcel of the energy that is the entire universe. Becoming conscious of that and witnessing it is our supreme opportunity to live life to the full. It's that simple. Neither is birth the beginning nor death the end of life. I've said this many times. Life doesn't begin and end with the womb or death or the womb to tomb, all that. Life is the universe, the engine of life itself. We are but a product of that potential. To realize with our observing mind that drama, that incredible machine of which we're a part, is a very privileged position, right? The true life extends far beyond both of these commonly assumed limits. Things come and pass away, but truth abides. Men are born and disappear, but life itself is imperishable. Buddhahood is neither a new acquisition nor a quality destined to destruction. The one who embodies the cosmic truth, Buddha, the Tathagata, neither is born nor dies, but lives and works from eternity to eternity. Eternity is a shitty word. It's time without beginning, time without end. Much more specific, maybe even harder to understand, but at least puts some kind of parameters to it. Eternity, right? It's like infinity. Come on. His Buddhahood is primeval and his inspiration everlasting. How, then, can it be otherwise with any other beings? If only they realize this truth and live in full consciousness of it. Thus, the revelation of the everlasting life discloses the infinite measure of the Tathagata's life, which means at the same time the share of the true Buddhist in the eternal life of Buddha and in the inextinguishable endurance of the truth. It's a permanent truth, if you will. It's a truth that is unassailable, that doesn't go away, that doesn't appear. It's just truth, which is what Siddhartha was after from the very start, yeah? It was this teaching of the eternal life, both of Buddha and of ourselves, that inspired in Buddhist belief boundless strength and led Tendai and Dengyo to systematize their theory about the primeval dignity of Buddhahood and the pre-established possibility of our supreme enlightenment. Nichiren inherited and emphasized these doctrines as the very basis of his Buddhist thought. But we shall see later how he applied the conception of the primeval relationship between the Buddha and his disciples to the moral life of mankind. Well, absolutely, because that was the goal in the first place. That's what Siddhartha was in search of, right? The climax of the revelation is followed by a series of encouraging assurances given by Buddha, or Shakyamuni Buddha, and of the enthusiastic vows made by the disciples and celestial beings, the audience of the Lotus Sutra. The revelation of the eternal past is thus followed by the assurance for the everlasting future. The past and the future are united in the oneness of the truth. There it is, the cycle of the universe. By the unity of purpose, of methods, and power in all the Buddhas of all ages, in short, in the sole road of truth, the one vehicle. This is the cardinal teaching of the Lotus, as in other Buddhist books or systems, but the special emphasis laid by the Lotus, particularly in the last 12 chapters, is upon the question, who shall really be the one who will perpetuate and realize this truth of this single vehicle, the one vehicle? The truth abides eternally, but it is an abstraction, a dead law, without the person who perpetuates the life of the truth. The Buddha Shakyamuni, in his human manifestation, was the one, the Tathagata, par excellence, but who shall be the one in the future, nay, in the present, in these days of degeneration and vice? This was the question of Nichiren, who at last, as the result of his hard experience and perilous life, arrived at the conclusion that he himself was the man destined to achieve the task of the Tathagata's messenger. All of the remaining chapters, the consummation and perpetuation of the truths revealed, have always been a strong inspiration to Buddhist practice. The narratives and prophecies contained in them gave consolation in various ways, and the bodhisattvas in the stories were objects of great devotion and respect, dignity. That word appears here several times, on the part of many Buddhists, especially the compassionate help promised to Buddhists by the Avalokitesvara, the personage of mercy. Chapter 25 was regarded as a powerful incentive to grateful resolve. He keeps using saints and deities, but he's already explained that those words really are bodhisattvas. So why does he insist on using these old Christian words? I'm trying to correct it as I go so I don't confuse. Other bodhisattvas or great personages appearing in these chapters were regarded as protectors of the Buddhists, and their assiduous practice, their dedicated practice, consisted in devotion to them and dependence on their divine meaning. Yeah? In short, for most Buddhists before Nichiren, the admiration of these chapters and the practice of the or dignity of these personages who appear in them amounted to praying for benefits and even to superstition. I love that he said that, because we can see that today in some groups, right? Praying for benefits and even to superstition. Yeah, that's not Buddhism. This guy's calling it out over 100 years ago. And he's saying that that was the foolishness of people before Nichiren. And yet we have groups and sects today that are promulgating the same magical, mystical stupidity as Nichiren. I'll read it again. In short, for most Buddhists before Nichiren, the admiration of these chapters of the Lotus Sutra and worship who appear of these beings, these deifications, appear in them amounted to praying for benefits. Please gimme, 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 gimme. And even to superstition. Of course, superstition, because that's no different from Christianity. God will help me. God, all-knowing God will help. No, you're the all-knowing. since Nichiren that we've nailed that down. Not because Nichiren invented it, but because he pointed all the way back to Shakyamuni and say, look, this is what he was teaching. That the entire engine of life is happening in your mind. Look at it, participate in it, have all of it, understand it, swim in it, be in it. It's yours to experience. Life is happening for you, not to you. Now Nichiren interpreted the consummation and perpetuation in a totally different manner. The inspiration he derived from these narratives was a spirit of emulation instead of mere piety. Why? You see how important those words are? All of us, each one of us, are emulating Nichiren, emulating Shakyamuni. What does that mean, to emulate? It means to do for oneself with the kind and beneficent example of another. We don't idly follow the other. Show me which way to go. No. That person's a trailblazer. We become trailblazers. We don't imitate, we emulate. Big difference. The inspiration he derived from these narratives was a spirit of emulation instead of mere piety. The life of the true Buddhist was to be lived in emulating the courageous and compassionate spirit of the divine beings and the vows they uttered. This is why we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Here I am, I'm doing it, ready to be Buddha. Myoho Renge Kyo. I am a leader, not a follower. I am a leader. This was due to Nichiren's peculiar conception of the whole scripture, namely, that it was a book not to be read simply by the eyes or merely understood by the mind, but to be read by the body, one's own active engagement with life. That is, by flesh and blood. Be Buddha, right? Be Buddha-ness. Be the bodhisattva that is fully aware, manifesting all of life and what life has to offer your particular instantiation. The truths revealed therein were, for Nichiren, the records of the true Buddhist life, which was realized by the bodhisattvas of the past and therefore to be striven for by all Buddhists of the coming age. Mapo, yeah? This is the great message. I drop that. Seen in this light, the whole book, and especially the part on the consummation and perpetuation, was a storehouse of exhortations and precepts, prophecies, and assurances given to the future Buddhists, especially to those living in the latter days of the world. For instance, take chapter 21 on the mysterious power of the Tathagata. It is not only a revelation of Buddha's own divine work, but an assurance given to all Buddhists that the mysterious power should be realized and embodied in every Buddhist's actual life. Nichiren regarded as of the highest importance a passage pointing to a definite person, designated him as this man. Quote, just as the light of the sun and moon expels all dimness and darkness, so this man, living and working in the world, repels the gloom of illusion of all beings. That's a direct exhortation to you and I. And Nichiren took it personally. How this statement was taken as a prophecy concerning the leader of the true Buddhism in those days, that is, Nichiren himself, will be seen as we follow his growing consciousness of his mission. To take another instance, there is a passage in chapter 23 on the Bodhisattva Vaisajaraja, Bodhisattva, I forget in the Lotus Sutra. Anyway, chapter 23. Never disparaging, I think. Foretelling the propagation of the Lotus of Truth in the 5th 500 years after the Buddha's death. Herein Nichiren saw another prophetic assurance given to him of his mission. Prophetic, not incarnation. He's an embodiment of that personage, of that exhortation. Yeah? When you're told all your life to be a good person, and you find yourself doing activities in society that define you as doing good things, you understand you're not an incarnation of some previous. What you are is an embodiment of that action, that exhortation, that mission, right? Of great importance, in Nichiren's view, was the story of the Bodhisattva Sariputta, a previous life of the Buddha himself, told in the 20th chapter. The story is this. While Buddha was still living or striving for Buddhahood, he was a monk and used to salute every person he met as a future Buddha. Do you do that? Do I do that? I try. It's hard to keep it in mind that everyone we deal with, even the person who cut us off on the freeway, is a future Buddha. With that kind of attitude about society, our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, our lovers, how would we see them differently? Think about it. Yeah, it's mind-blowing, isn't it? Because he was convinced that everyone was destined to eventually be so. The people, however, took this salute as an insult. Yeah, we can think it, but saying it could bring about a lot of weird stuff, yeah? Although when we inculcate or when we include somebody in our Buddhist practice so that we can inspire in them a willingness, a desire for, or plant the seed of Buddhahood in others' mind, that's what we're doing. We're telling them, you could be enlightened. You will be enlightened. When do you want to start? And in turn insulted and abused the monk. You are future Buddha. Screw you, right? How many times would you hear that? So that's not the right approach. But the point is being made here. This is an internal monologue, not an external one. You have to be more, what's the word? Sensitive to other people's, and with our Buddha-ness, Namo Myo Renge Kyo every day, we see clearly other people's tendencies and conditions. And therefore we can induce them to become curious or simply wait. They will be curious. And we have to be gentle, shoju, in our introduction to self-enlightenment. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Now, after that, when they get deluded or they start to argue, then maybe there's shakabuku involved. But going out in the parking lots and hitting people over the head with it is not a way to inculcate other Buddhas. They need to be gently brought into their own self-realization. Then the struggles will begin with their own demons, which we can't easily see. And we need to encourage and support and sometimes break them of false imaginations. But then they've already bought into it. They're already beginning. So they may need strictness at time and gentleness at others. That's Mappo. That's our day and age. And this is why I always say, if you're worried about how am I going to be a bodhisattva, well, it starts with liking and subscribing to this channel, availing yourself to stuff on threefoldlotus.com, and primarily, first and foremost, your own practice. Because it is your life condition of awakening your Buddha-ness that ultimately will influence those around you. That is the bodhisattva work. Then it may get more complicated, but that's all a negotiation with samsara, isn't it? Primarily, it's about Buddha-ness. He endured all this, but never changed his way of saluting others or his conviction that everyone was a Buddha to be. Therefore, he was called the constantly revering. This story is told as an occurrence in the past and also as an example for all Buddhists, especially for those living among the evilly disposed men of the degenerate age. People completely enamored with their egos, their possessions, their power, samsaric power. It was this aspect of the story, indicating an underlying bond connecting to the true Buddhist of the past with his successor in any age, that inspired Nichiren and kept him ever perseverant throughout all persecutions. Thus, in his mind, this story of the constantly revering bodhisattva was nothing else than another version of his own life, which was also foretold in the vows of endurance as recorded in the 13th chapter, the same spirit of endurance for the sake of the truth, and the same life in emulation and practice of the ardent vows of the ancient bodhisattvas. This was what he found in the story and derived from it incentive and consolation. So, this was a long one today. I apologize, but this is a very complete thought that I there's more in here, but I think the main gist of this is how Nichiren identified his mission, his life, and the life that you and I would come to emulate. This is our Buddhist practice. And it is all developed, obviated, taught, rounded out in the Lotus Sutra. This is why we're Lotus Sutra Buddhists. And Nichiren, our modern example of what that might look like. Living in a shogunate, in an authoritarian, dictatorial, contradictory, roiling state of competing egos, constant distractions, threat to life itself. If you don't think we live in that age, ask yourself how many nuclear weapons there are in the world. How much saber rattling is going on right now. Look at Russia, look at Ukraine, look at Yemen, look at anywhere in the world, and you'll find a lot of craziness, and it's all ego. How can we possibly survive as a species, let alone as dignified individuals, in such a melee? Buddhism, my friends, Buddhist practice is the only viable answer. Everything else is just hopeful, wishful, magical thinking. Oh, I hope. That's not satisfying. That's not even living. That's pathetic. It's so sad that so many rely on that position of no power and victimhood, waiting to be saved. You could be living your full life right now in the midst of this. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you. Do you understand how deeply grateful I am for your practice? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being a dignified human. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Patrons supporting this channel, you guys are incredible. Thank you for your courage, your dedication, your practice. Fellow Bodhisattva, I will see you in the next one. Bye for now. Myo.